Let's start with a stunning extraterrestrial scene here flying over the New York City landscape today. Even for jaded New Yorkers who claim they've seen everything, you haven't seen this one before here. Over the airspace of New York City, you saw the space shuttle Enterprise riding atop a modified jumbo jet, all in its journey to the new home at the Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum. And for some, the farewell flight marked the end of an era. The last shuttle mission launched, or landed, I should say, in 2011. And a lot of people say the space program will not be the same here, at least for the foreseeable future. And joining me at the table to talk not about space so much, but about just about everything else, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, Ed Cox, chairman of the New York State GOP, and our senior political correspondent and big space fan, Andrew Whitman. I could have called you something else there, but I didn't.
Sure.
Yes, all right. All right, let's get on to, guys, here the first issue. And you heard people from all strikes calling it Taxmageddon. And we are talking about our good old friends here, the debt limit, Bush tax cuts. If you thought that they were a fight that we had last year or even the earlier part of this year, trust me, they're back. They'll be back with a vengeance. And oh yeah, it's an election year. At the end of this year, Bush tax cuts, they're set to expire. They were supposed to expire earlier, but as you remember, after some drawn-out debate and drama, they were extended for another 2 years. This is all part of a larger economic package. Meanwhile, a payroll tax holiday and expanded unemployment insurance benefits, they also expire at the end of this year at around the same time. So, once again, we're going to reach the debt limit, the U.S. government spending limit, which now stands at about almost $16.5 trillion. And you can think of it as us reaching our credit card limit max here for the U.S. corporate gold card. Now, remember the bitter partisan fight? I don't think any of us are going to forget it anytime soon, as much as we'd like to, over the dog days of summer last year.
We must protect Medicare and Social Security. We will not support cuts.
This debt limit increase is his problem, and I think it's time for him to lead by putting his plan on the table.
Consequences of failing to raise the debt ceiling would be Armageddon-like.
I get a migraine just remembering that stuff. But the question is this going to happen all over again? What will happen when all of these economic forces collide? And of course here, as I said, it just so happens to be an election year with a lot of political futures up at stake. Well, former Obama budget director Peter Orszag, writing for MSN Money and Politics, painted two separate but equally disastrous kind of scenarios. First one here. A presidential victory by Mitt Romney would probably mean that nothing would get done during Congress's lame duck session at the end of 2012. After Romney took office, his administration would presumably negotiate a temporary deal to retroactively reinstate the tax cuts to the beginning of 2013, lifting the spending reductions and raising the debt limit for a few months. Republicans would then enact substantial and flawed, this is his words, structural reforms to Medicare and Medicaid, like block granting, Medicaid, and large reductions in programs like food stamps and Pell Grants. On the other hand, he writes, if Barack Obama is reelected, an attempt may be made to reach a deal before January 1. Key problem with this is that in this scenario, the president and his administration, House Republicans, they have proven they don't play well with each other and have irreconcilable differences when it comes to tax cuts that were carried over from the Bush years. Administration insists that cuts for people with incomes above $250,000 will not be extended again. That's their line in the sand, and House Republicans insist that they have to be as part of any plan going forward. So, how exactly is a deal going to get done in any year, let alone before the end of this year, a year with elections? Okay, long way of saying it's going to be a hot mess this year. And a lot of people are trying to read where the public's really pulse is on this one. What do they want to hear? What do they want to see? So a lot of folks say, smart folks say, it might be the only way to move us towards tax reform, as Ezra Klein wrote for Bloomberg, is to let the Bush tax cuts expire. That might lead to a force of wills here and actual reform. Their sudden withdrawal would be so calamitous to the economy and so embarrassing to D.C. as a whole that the crisis might actually force both parties to fast-track a reform plan. It's pretty sad to think it's the only way to save the tax code might be to let it collapse at the end of the year, but that doesn't mean it's not true. All right, so the collision of these countervailing economic forces, will it force voters to come to grips with which vision of America that they embrace? And no matter what you think, there's two clear choices: the cut taxes, cut spending vision, or the raise taxes, at least on the 1%, in order to save the safety net version. Okay. Andrew, we're kind of getting two different ideas here. Break it down real simply here, because that's going to be what the two different camps are going to try and do. Two different visions on how to rescue the American economy.
Let me try to simplify this as best I can and boil all of this down and try to boil how the economy works and how it doesn't work into a couple of graphics here. The first one shows how the economy works when everything is going well. You get workers and consumers, retailers and manufacturers, and basically it's one big cycle. You know, you get people who are working and buying stuff. That helps retailers, that helps manufacturers, they hire more workers, so the system goes round and round. And in good times, you get money from all of those groups that goes to the government in the middle. In bad times, you have less money that goes through there, so you have less money that goes to the government through taxes, and you wind up with debts and deficits. The question is, how do you change that cycle? How do you get more money into the system and get us out of a recession? Well, there are two different approaches. One is the spending model that's favored by progressives. You take more debt from the government, and the government sends more money out to workers, to retailers and manufacturers, and then puts more money in the system. That makes up for the lack of spending that's been going on in the system during a recession, and hopefully everybody gets well again. Yes, the government takes on more debt, but in the long run, when the economy expands, you can wipe away some of that debt a little bit later. In the other model, the austerity model, which is favored by conservatives, the focus is in the middle, trying to reduce debt. So you cut taxes and you cut spending, which means less money going from the government out to all of those groups. But as you see on the outside of the model there, retailers, consumers, and manufacturers, they keep more of their money, and the hope is that they spend more of their money if that money's not going to Washington to pay off the taxes. So the hope is that they keep the money, and that's how you change the system and get more money flowing around in the system.
Now, whenever we talk economics, it's like white noise. You can almost hear the remotes clicking off here. But the basic idea of trickle up, trickle down theories, it's going to be said in 1,000 different ways, but that's going to be it. Ed, I'm going to start with you. Whatever people think of the 99% here and the 1% and the class warfare that may or may not play out during the balance of this term, people, majority of the polls say they don't think the system's fair. And they think that if you're in the middle class or below, you've been getting a raw deal out of this. How do Republicans reconcile that while at the same time saying we got to cut taxes?
Look, let me start with the two alternatives that Andrew was talking about. Government does not create jobs. It's the private sector and business that creates jobs. And you need to have growth if we're going to get ourselves out of the fiscal mess that we're in. In order to have growth, you've got to cut taxes so businesses have more funds to grow, people have more funds in their pockets so they can spend it. Just having government collect it and pass it out, normally they'll do it like the Obama stimulus bill. It didn't stimulate anyone but his political friends. It was done for political purposes. It was not effective. Almost $1 trillion of stimulus stimulated nothing. Government does it, it's going to run politically. You cut taxes or leave taxes at the low rate that they are now. People have money in their pockets. Business will have money to invest. That's the way you grow the economy.
I would beg to differ only in that we've seen both examples work historically. In FDR, after the Great Depression, and also you could make the argument that the Obama stimulus prevented things from being worse than they were by having the government fill the void that was left by people not spending. We have also seen cutting taxes work. When Reagan did it, for example, it did work because it provided more money out there to the businesses.
Even though our debt and deficits went up.
So there are examples where it's worked in both cases. It's not like only one of these plans can possibly work. The question is which one works for us right now. And also, by the way,
when taxes
I challenge the FDR one, though. I don't think that worked necessarily.
Well, let's do it in more modern times, okay? Under Bill Clinton, tax rates were 39%. The deficit was reduced actually under a sitting president. Our debt went down as a country. We cut taxes and our debt's gone up, skyrocketed. My question is, forget about principle for a moment. Politically, your job is to get folks elected. Do you think the general public wants to hear let's keep top-end tax rates here 34%. Let's not go to 39%. Do you think the public wants to hear that? You know what the hue and cry is going to be when, I assume Romney at one point is going to release his taxes. If they say, wait a second, how's this guy paying 14% and I'm going to my pocket for 30-something%? This is nuts. How does that play to Peoria when they say the 1%'s doing this, paying less than me, I'm here in the 99 and I'm getting shafted?
Yeah, but
does that win you
do you
seats?
think the people in the lower brackets want to have their taxes increased too?
But
they
they're
will
not
be
on,
increased.
right now they're not being slated to go up.
Oh yeah, they'll all go up. If you take off the Bush, if the Bush tax cuts go away, they were cut across the board, they'll go up across the board. Everyone gets hurt, the economy gets hurt, you lose growth.
But what's scary in this entire scenario that you've been describing here, Richard, is that, and I'm not trying to take a partisan line, Mr. Chair, however, it seems that Republicans have drawn a line in the sand and have said, we don't care, cut, 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 no more spending. We're now looking at, and we've talked about this on this program, cities all across America where they can't keep traffic lights on. They've got to cut the police force by 50%. So Republicans have done a good job of making tax increases the boogeyman. I mean, they are not on the table at all. And Obama is boxed in where he can't win in this
and you
debate.
know, when we come back from the break, I want to go and I want to talk about the looming fights and how we see this plays out. Because maybe it'll hurt the sitting president, maybe it'll hurt Republicans, but one way or the other, there's a fight coming over the debt limit. There's a fight coming over.
There's always a fight between Republicans and this president.
And there's always going to be another fight here when it comes to renewing or not renewing the Bush tax cuts.